Mm.
Okay, I think we are recording. So the last, I love that smile. You got a best smile. I love the picture you posted recently of you laughing too. Do you have any thoughts? Did you do? I know it's been a few weeks, but did you do the homework of the videos of the angels, the Bible Project angels?
Oh, sure didn't.
You could have easily just been like, yeah, I did it, but it was so long ago. I don't remember.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no. Because people then test you on that line. They'd be like, well, what was the overarching theme of all of them? You'd be like,
I just had a busy week. Look, I have 4 kids.
I had listened to the one podcast that you had mentioned.
Uh-huh.
Now that I listened to a couple of years ago. So it talks about, the word, what is it? The word spirit or the word God and how, there are different types of spirits, and I think they also got into or maybe that was a different one where they talked about, the word Christ and the word Messiah, and how many people had that people were given that title, but who is the real Messiah? What do we call angels? What do we call God or gods? What different spirit realm things, whatever.
Yeah,
that's from a couple years ago.
It's interesting when we read our English translations. Like, we have our own understanding. We and I can't remember if we went over it in this study or the one prior to this, but we bring our own encyclopedia of knowledge. Like, when we read, our own reference manual is like stored, and our brain just automatically pulls from it. And it doesn't pull the same information that the Israelites pull, right? Their encyclopedia of information was completely different than ours. And so when I find little pieces of information and I'm just like, whoa, I had it so wrong. Like, one is the valley of the shadow of death. Like that, the shadow of death, somebody was like, oh, if there's shadow, that must mean that there's light somewhere. And so that must mean Jesus is nearby. And so you're safe if you're in the shadow. You can't be in the shadow without a light. Like, they were literally that was their sermon. And I was like, that's cool and all, but that's not what it is. The valley of the shadow of death is an actual place. Like, that's a name of a location. It's not talking about a shadow. And it was a valley between two mountains where people would go get robbed. Like, if you took that path, you'd get robbed. Like, you were consistently attacked and whatever. And so it was talking about God's protection while you're in this perilous place. I mean, the person's sermon was great, and it had a very inspiring and uplifting message, and it was good. And it's definitely the way I had interpreted it. It's very similar to that prior to understanding what the valley of the shadow of death actually meant. Another one I heard recently was, I think it's in Nehemiah. It says, the joy of the Lord is my strength, is how our Bibles translate it, right? Well, that word strength is meoz, like ME'Oz, meoz. Anyways, it's kind of like meor, but a little bit just conjugated a bit differently. And what it means is fortress or rock. The joy of the Lord is my fortress. Not so, like, I've always interpreted that verse, like, the joy of the Lord is my strength, to be like, oh, it's what makes me strong. But when you think of it as your fortress, that's where you run to for protection and for covering.
Right. Which is
a different connotation.
When we started earlier months ago, and maybe it was like the Bible study before this, and we were talking about, what translation to use. I think what I didn't, like, some, whatever you kind of grow up using and or your church uses, the couple of things that you might, or a couple of things that I might have memorized, are usually like King James Version things.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful.
Kind of tripped up when when it's just like, or it'll be like maybe like a New King James version. So
It's a little bit more current.
vowels, but some of those words stay the same. And so as we are like reciting scripture, and I might say rock and somebody else says strength, and I'm like, well, how did that mixed up? Like, was it all like, is the definition now is because I didn't understand. I was like, are you saying, or is the translation now according to how we speak now? Or is the translation now a better translation of what was written in that different language? Like, so it's like, when you use your translations, like you say, you kind of got to go back and at the original Aramaic, Greek, Hebrew, and really try to understand what was actually being said. Because I get tripped up like that too.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, so I mean, I have so many times like that where I'm like, okay, it's an idiom, or it's a play, like, because there's a lot of things that people take, and I've been taught to take literally, and then you find out later it's an idiom, and you're like, oh, it wasn't actually raining cats and dogs. Like, they weren't, I thought it was a miracle. I thought God was throwing animals at us, or, whatever it was. So yeah, it's just so interesting when you get in to do the studies, and it's in the eye-opening, eyes that see, that happen during studies is a different eye-opening that happens during quiet time. And a lot of times I think that we focus on getting people to read the Bible or have a quiet time every day, but we don't focus on the scholarly or the study aspect. And I think that, at least here in America, at least in the South where I am, and I think that people miss out when we don't do the more in-depth studies. I know that I've gotten a lot out of studying. It's changed my perspective, and it's deepened my relationship and stuff like that. So
yeah, a couple of pastors ago, I went up to my pastor and I said, I just don't enjoy your Bible study. And she was like, why? And I was like, because I know I sound mean, but the same people keep coming with the same problems. And I feel like this is group therapy, not Bible study.
I remember that time you were going through that study.
And I was like, I just want to study the Bible. And I was like, and if my life is reflected in that, I want that. But this was like different from like, seeing yourself in these stories. This was literally like group therapy at church. And I'm just not here for it. And so she was like, here, you go to this Bible study. She sent me to another one. And I was like, and so I went there and I was just like, this is great. It gave me like a good, like, overview. I mean, of course, that Bible study, we studied Isaiah, which that was like taking a knife to the heart and it completely gutted. So I was emotional like the whole year for that. And I thought it was going to be like dumb. I was like, really? Isaiah for a year? I pretty much think I can read that, in a night. Like, it's not that long. But to dig deep.
Yeah.
It took a year, or an academic year. And I was grateful for it because it really cut me to the core. But that's what I was looking for, to go in, to study it, and then be able to relate.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about it just cut me open and cut me to the core. That just reminds me of course, the word is what? It's a sharp two-edged sword. It's sharper than any two-edged sword, able to divide between, here comes my King James, between it's not, I can't remember, it's not muscle, it's not meat, but whatever it is, and sinew. Right? Between the muscle and the tendon, it's able to separate it. And I just cut up a turkey recently, and those tendons, man, them are hard to get off from the meat. So It definitely is good. So I'm glad that we're doing this study, and I'm so grateful to have people like you who come every week because you keep me on my toes and let me keep me on schedule doing what I'm supposed to be doing, because Lord knows I need that accountability. So, all right, talked about homework. So now today we're going to focus on Genesis chapter 1 we're going to focus on humans. Humans. What day were the humans created? Day 6, right? Day 6. You're muted. I don't know if that's on purpose because I thought I saw you talking, so I'm not sure. But day 6. So day 6, verse, I think it's 28. No, it's not going to be 28 because the verse I like is 26.
27.
Oh, 20. Let's start with, we can skip. Day 6 starts on 24, but we can skip down to 26.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to read it or you want me to read it?
Sure.
And going on through 28.
Okay. Then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the ground.
All righty. So what in those verses about humans, what do you think is the main focus?
Well, for me, the main focus is in the likeness of God.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's like, and I want to say themselves because it says in our image, not just in my image. And so like just acknowledging that triune God being right there all the time, thinking of themselves in its many faceted forms, and then creating an image that is in different facets as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And this actually, so that's exactly right. And the verse that's right there in the middle was verse 27, which in most Bibles, it shows it's going to be indented and formatted a little bit differently. This is the first poem that shows up in the Bible. And when you see poetry within a narrative, it means that it's something of main focus. It's something that usually kind of gives an overview or points to what the most important part of the story is. So you have right there in poetry, it's standing out. It's like it's on a billboard for us to don't miss this. Don't just get into your zombie-like trance where you're reading and you don't even pay attention to what you read. I don't know if you've ever done that. I will read something, no matter what the material is. It could be a book I'm enjoying, a fictional book, and I'm reading it. And then I get 2 pages in and I'm like, what did I just read? And I have to go back and reread it. So it's like trying to get our attention. So we're not in that state where we just read without paying attention or understanding. So it's saying, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. And that little poem. So God created humans, Adam, in his image. The image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So that is that same word, at what we call Adam in other translations. So Adam gets translated into 2 things in our English Bibles, into humans or Adam. So there's 2 different things. And so when he created Adam, he created all of us. And you see that later on in chapter 2 when because we were there, we being females, were there in that original creation because we were formed out of his side, not his rib. Rib does not appear in the Hebrew text. That is not in there at all. So, you know, we were there at creation, but even Adam, even all of humanity came out of another form of creation, like he came out of the earth. So we were always a part, we being humans, were always a part of God's plan. It's his, and you know what they say, saving the best for last, right? It's his crowning creation, his best. So within the framework of the 6 days of the 6th day of Genesis, the appointment of humanity as God's image is the climactic act of God's work, as this moment is saved for last. The key moment in Genesis is Genesis 26 through 28 is designed as literary symmetry. So there's some symmetrical elements that framework that 27 in the middle. Verse 27 is that poetic verse. Now in that poetic verse, there's 3 lines, and each of those lines has 3 key elements. The same thing is being described in each line. It's not like there's 3 different acts of creation there, right? God is describing his one act of creating humanity from kind of 3 different perspectives. So the first line, it says, so God created human in his own image, right? The second line, he created him in the image of God. Third line, he created them, male and female. So he's talking about the same thing. It's not like there was 3 different things that happened. This is the same thing. Now, each of those lines has 3 elements in it. It's all talking about creation. So who, in the first line, who created?
God.
God created. And what did God create?
Humans.
Humans. And how did he create them?
He spoke them into
existence. It says in his image.
In his image. Oh,
there you go. There you go. You got it.
I was like, he spoke it into existence. and we look like him.
In his image. We're going to get into that word image. So the next line, someone created again. Who created? Well, it says he created. Who is the he? They're referring back to God, not the human, right? Not to Adam. God created. What did God create? This time God created him, right? And how did he create him? In the image of God. So just giving a little bit more information about image. And then the third line, there's creation again. Who created? He, aka God, created. But this time, what did he create? He created them. And how did he create? Well, he created male and female, right? So this poetic parallelism makes clear that the divine image is constituted in some crucial way by the duality of gender. God's gender, like I remember, what was that book? The Shack. The Shack had this image, and it was a female image that represented God. And I remember so many people got so upset, and they were like, that's not God, because it's a female. And I was like, hey, Genesis 1, right? We are all created in the image of God, male and female, right? So God has a duality of gender. So somehow God is imaged in this special way through the unity of humanity as one species that consists of distinct others. Humanity is one and more than one at the same time. So we have this one thing, humans, but within humanity, there's all these individuals. And even, humanity is one, it's broken out into 2 genders, and in each gender we have individuals. So it's just like all these different things building into the one. And this offers us an important image of God's divine identity, which is plurality and unity. In other words, ruling in partnership together. So it's a key part of the image of God. And like you were saying, this leads us into a neat doorway of Trinitarian thinking, into the Holy Trinity. Not only you were talking about the let's make man in our image, but even the fact that humanity is more than one. When they're making humans, they're making more than one. And God was very clear about that. He didn't have to add this, I created them male and female, right? Like if we know God created humans, he could have left all that out. He could have done it a different way. He was very clear. So seeing multiples in one was the first thing that should stand out to us here in this passage, since it was the center of this poem. But some other things we need to explore is that word image, right? I said we were going to talk about that. Image is another word for likeness or well, let me ask you, what does image mean here? You said that we look like God. So God has 10 fingers. He's got all different kinds of hair, because we all have different skin tones and hair and sizes. But
I could go off on hair. I got 4 textures of hair in this little fro. four classifications.
2 days ago, I went off watching hair videos because I was trying to find a new product. I ended up buying some Pattern. You heard of that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was watching hair videos all day. Anyways, yeah. So what does it mean to be made in the image of God? What does that mean to you? Like when you're reading this, I don't know if you've already done research on this, like what was the Hebrew meaning of image here or anything, but what have you been taught in church growing up that means? And how do you think what you were taught is right or wrong? Like, how do you see similarly or differently from what you were taught?
I think there's always been like almost like a political stance on God's image. One taught that God's image is male, but
patriarchy at its finest.
But 2, for growing up in the Black church, mostly AME, like having this fortitude of being proud of your skin color, and so being made in God's image means that it means a lot of it was the closest thing we have to God's image is what we think Jesus looks like, and referring to that and taking pride in the bronze skin and the hair that is like wool or something like that. And so if we are made in God's image, that is inclusive of African American, the entire diaspora, taking that into account. So like that's how I was taught. And then I've been in a Bible study where I have felt the need to like reawaken that almost political stance of he doesn't just look like you. Mm-hmm. He looks like me too, or I look like him too. I know that's a lot, but
I'm trying to pull something up and I can't remember the name of the church, but you had me thinking about, there's this church in, it's a Roman Catholic church. It's in like the outskirts of Israel. Where was he born? Where is he from? They're like, oh, you're from so-and-so. You can't amount to anything. It's not Bethlehem. It's Nazareth. I think it's Nazareth. It's in Nazareth. And I believe, I could be wrong, but this Catholic church has pictures of Mary holding the baby Jesus. And this room is filled with like 300 pictures of this. And they got every culture, they got people from many different nations. So there's one picture from many different nations. And to represent what would it look like if Mary and Jesus were a part of your ethnicity. And so it's like 300 different pictures of Mary and Jesus. And I loved it. It was beautiful. I want to remember what it was. So I can show you these pictures. Mary model religions, but let's see. I've got some of them up here, but there's a particular church I wanted to look up. So let me do this screen share here. I wasn't planning on showing this, so I didn't have it ready. But look, you can see so many of these different Marys holding Jesus from different cultures. This is definitely, we got St. Mary's Basilica in lights. That's obviously not what I'm referring to. But the first pictures that came up were close to it because they were all paintings, and it's similar to these ones here. I don't know if you can see where my mouse is going, but they're all different ones of a Mary holding a baby or toddler Jesus. And it was beautiful because it reminds you that, yes, Jesus was, first of all, Jesus did have a national identity, because it's very important to the storyline in the New Testament and how he was treated. But at the same time, he came for all of us, and we're all to identify with him. And when we identify with people, we usually see them as ourselves. Like when we read a book, when we read a story, when we're imagining the characters, we usually see them more as representations of the people that we hang out with. You don't see, when you're reading a book, unless it gives you a description saying, okay, it's a person who lives in Hawaii. You don't generally think of a Hawaiian person filling that role unless you happen to also live in Hawaii. And so we generally, when we picture people, in order to identify with them or have some kind of similarity with them, we generally want to see them, as similar to us. But I love that. And I love seeing the diversity in it. And because in America, at least, we have white Jesus plastered on everything. So that one's so prominent. So seeing all the diversity of cultures, I thought was beautiful. I loved it. I don't even remember how we got on that topic.
You asked me what I thought about the image of God and what did that mean? How was I raised to understand the image of God? And then I brought up Jesus because that is like the identifying human part of God, tying to especially the wool hair being a significant, like something tangible, something able to identify with.
Yeah. So you could feel when you feel wool, you can feel what it might feel like. And didn't say silk hair or straight like pins or, whatever. Very, very descriptive information. Yeah. And it's interesting to me too. I was listening. A lot of times people think of God as not being a physical being. I just had heard a sermon the other day about how to hear from God, how to hear the voice of God. And he was like, we are spirit, soul, and body, but God, he's just spirit. And I was like, that's so interesting, because I thought it described like his hair and they have a physical description of him. And heaven is a physical place. It talks about like things that you can see and touch. And I don't know. It just was an interesting take to me to say, okay, we're made in his image, but he's not physical at all. He's there's no physical presence to him. And I think that definitely heavenly beings' physical presence would be different than what we understand a physical presence to be. But I think to say that it's only spirit is not accurate if we're made in his image. So that's my take on it. Anyways, but all right. So the word image in Hebrew, because remember, we're going to go back and look at, okay, well, we have our own encyclopedia of knowledge that we're bringing, but what is the Hebrew word image mean? And a lot of times we think of it as likeness and things like that. And I also want to get into this ruling, like we're set to rule. And remember, we had these rulers that had authority over day and night introduced a few days earlier, and that's very important and a fundamental order. But the whole drama of this narrative right here is about what happens here on the land, right? And the future of the land. And even it culminates with getting a new land, like the one we know is going to disintegrate and get a new one. And it mentions heaven too, but we don't get to see too many of the details going on up there. So it's all about how it's to be cared for. There's so many laws about how the land's to be cared for. Even the land needs a Sabbath, just like humans are supposed to have a Sabbath. The land's supposed to have a Sabbath. And we need the land so that we can be fruitful and multiply. Like when God gave us a blessing, we're told to be fruitful and multiply. And all of that comes from having rulers down here on the land, down here below. So we are the rulers. Humanity is the ruler. We're given an amazing amount of degree of freedom and responsibility. And that sets the tone for this whole biblical story. Which is a tone of a God who invites, who shares, who's generous. This God doesn't crave power and authority. He wants to share it with us. And that to me is amazing, because when you study history, I mean, these people would kill their own siblings and their own children to not lose their power and authority and throne, the kings of, the ancient cultures. And maybe even in today's political climate, they do something similar. It's just not as known to us. Maybe they kill them in the press, or kill their reputation or whatever. But because they want to hold on to that power. But that's not how God is. He wants to share his power. He actually wants his will to be done, not because he did it, but he wants others to do it for him. That's like his ultimate joy, is to see others who want to do the people that he loves want to do his will. The God of the Bible is a God who delights in partnering with others so their united wills discover a future together. So because he gives us free will, right? It's not like he creates us to go do these things and we have no choice. He creates us with our own will, and he has his wills and desires. When those are united and discover a future together, that's his ultimate will. Humanity is not just a passive recipient of God's purpose for creation. We are not just on the sidelines watching him do his thing. We're instead summoned to be actively involved in the very means by which his purposes are accomplished. And that reminds me of a quote I read in a book, Red Letter Christian. It's up there, I think. I can't remember. I don't see it, but I think that's my New Testament book, so it should be up there. Anyways, Red Letter Christian is by a guy, Shane Claiborne, and someone else. And he was like, you know what? We are supposed to be we're supposed to be ruling this land. We're supposed to be taking care of it. We're supposed to be bringing forth God's purposes on earth. So when somebody tells you they need a new roof, when you ask for prayer requests at the church and somebody's saying they need a new roof, and they ask over and over and over again, maybe instead of you just saying, okay, I'm going to pray about it, you should get a hammer, put on your work clothes, and go help. We are supposed to be doing the work for God. That's part of what we're supposed to be doing, and not just sitting and passively and just praying God's will be done. Not with us.
Okay,
they're going to get a new roof.
I caught myself as I was driving home, And I passed an exit, and I should have stopped off for my own well-being to get gas, and I didn't. And so I was like, oh Lord, please let me get to another gas station, or you're gonna get me there. And then my light turned on, and I got to the gas station, and I filled up, and I said, thank you, Lord, for keeping me. And then I went, you know, the Lord gave me the abilities to have and maintain a job, to maintain my home and the things that I need, and to be able to drive and take care of this car. And it is my fault that I waited until the gas light came on. And I still thank the Lord, but had I not made it, that would have been his doing. It would have been my fault.
Absolutely.
Because he gave me everything I needed to make sure that I had gas in my car for 500 miles, including there are stops along the way. And so I was like, well, I thank you, Lord, for all of that stuff, and I'm just going to do better.
Help me listen to your unction, your presence. Right? When you told me to get off at that last exit and I ignored you and kept on driving, help me to listen the first time. And thank you for not making me fall to my own shortcomings,
Yes.
So many times he does that. He protects us when it's just, it would be the consequences of our own decisions and actions. And he's covering us in ways that we don't even deserve. That happens so much. Amen. What a great story. Thank you. But yeah, no, we're supposed to be like, prayer isn't just about, I remember there's this one person who I was getting to know. There was a site called Cafe Mom. This is back, I think you were on Facebook at the time because it was only for colleges, but I couldn't because I wasn't in college. And so I was on this site called Cafe Mom, and I met this woman who lived down the street from me. And I was like, she wanted to meet in person because she was new to the area and didn't know people. And I was like, cool, I meet you, but only like let's meet up at church. Like, I felt like that was a good, safe area and everything. And so she showed up at church a couple times. I got to know her. Eventually she was just like, yeah, I think I'm done with church. I'm done with it. I'm done with Christianity. That's not for me. I was like, well, tell me about it. Tell me why. What's your thought process here? Just clue me in all of it. She's like, all Christians ever do when they pray is sit and beg and ask the Lord for stuff. And I was like, well, I can see how you'd have that thinking, but you're supposed to be like, that's not a mature, but that's not the goal of prayer. It's supposed to be a two-way communication. You're supposed to spend time listening as well. That's a developed personal prayer walk and prayer life. But she's like, yeah, but when we pray communally, I mean, she didn't use that word, but she's like, when you're at church and you hear someone pray, it's just, you're listing off your items. Okay, thank you, Lord. And so that's all she knew about prayer. And she's like, that's not for me. I don't want to, this is all fluff. This feels so fake. And like, just gimme. And, unfortunately, she didn't, she stuck with her decision, even when I was talking to her and everything, she's like, okay, I get what you're saying, but that's not what I see happening. So I'm done, And anyways, so she went on and tried another religion, but it's not about it. I think that in another study, I talked about prayer. When we did a study on prayer, I was like, a lot of people treat it like a drive-through. You pull up, you place your order, and you expect it to be fulfilled before you leave the parking lot, right? And that's not what prayer is. Prayer is supplication, is presenting yourself as a living sacrifice. It's listening to God, and it's acting out his will. It's doing the purposes he has planned for your life, the good works that he has planned for your life since before the foundation of this world, right? There are acts and things that he has planned for us. And so we're supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to be bringing forth his will on earth, heaven here on earth. So getting back to image and not to ruling, that's more on the ruling side, but image, the word image in Hebrew is the word zelem. It's like a TZ together. Like there's some some languages that have sounds that, English doesn't have. And this is one of those. It's like a TZ sound together, zelem. And what it means is likeness. The literal translation is likeness. It's most commonly used to refer to physical statues of stone or wood. When you see images, this word zelem in the Hebrew Bible, Hebrew scriptures, it's usually referring to physical statues of stone or wood. What does that sound like to you? Physical statues of stone or wood?
An idol.
Mm-hmm. And that's how it's normally translated into English. 90% of the time, the word zelem is translated as idol or statue, idol or statue. Okay. So here's an example. Numbers 33, 51 and 52. Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you cross over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants and the land from before you, and destroy all their figured stones, and destroy all their molten images, and demolish their high places. So I put the word images there that where zelem would be. That's where the zelem would be. It's talking about the stone and molten, which would be metal, images, which are idols. So you're supposed to get rid of all the Canaanites' idols here, right? That's what's being told to us in Numbers. 2 Kings 11:18. All the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore it down, his altars and his idols. They broke into pieces thoroughly. So that idols right there is the word zelem, right? This same word that we use for being made in the image of God. So in ancient Israelite context, when God is creating a zelem, when he's creating us, the foremost thing that a Hebrew reader is going to identify that with is he's making an idol or a statue. And the purpose of the zelem, remember, is to represent a deity. So I've got a quote for us from H. Neer. He's a theologian who wrote this book. Genesis 1:26 can only be understood against the backdrop of an ancient Yahweh statue. Humanity is regarded as the statue of God. The terms image and likeness are used as synonyms denoting a statue. Humans were thus created to be the living statues of the deity. There was no need of a divine image because humans represented Yahweh as a statue would have done. Now remember, it's one of the 10 commandments. Make no image of Yahweh, make no image of God. They use the word, instead of God, they use the unspeakable name, right? Yahweh. You don't have to think too hard about that. He's the creator. So you're automatically downgrading the status of Yahweh through anything that humans can create. It reminds me of, let's see. Let's go to Psalms. Psalms 115 is what this one is. Psalms 115. Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory because of your love and faithfulness. Why did the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in heaven. Remember, because all these nations, they had their gods. I'll be like, this is my God right here. See? Mm-hmm. But the Israelites don't have one of these. So the nations are like, where's their God? This imaginary God that they worship. So that's what he's talking about. Why do the nations say, where is my God? Well, our God's in heaven. He does whatever pleases him. But their idols, those are made out of silver and gold. And they're made by human hands. They have mouths, but they can't speak. They have eyes that can't see. They have ears that can't hear and noses that can't smell. They have hands but can't feel and feet that don't walk. And they can't even utter a sound with their throats. And those that make them are going to be like them. And so will all who trust in them. And so I jumped to this verse because it's like, okay, God created idols, right? We are idols. We are images of God. And guess what? We can talk, we can walk, we can smell, we can touch, we can do all these things. And these other nations are looking at us, being Israelites, imagining this, going, where's your God? And you're like, dude, your idol can't even smell. Look at me. I can smell. I'm the idol. I'm the image. I'm the statue of God. You're worshiping something you created and it can't even talk to you, right? And so I think that this is a great little synopsis that kind of, this is what, when I think of it, a Zelum, it reminds me of. And then it forwards me. So I hyperlink here when I think of being an idol as an image, us being idols, because we can do all these things that they can't. But then it hyperlinks me forward because when Jesus is talking, he's like about people who don't understand what he's saying when he comes on and is sharing the gospel message. He's like, they have eyes, but they cannot see, and they have ears, but they cannot hear, right? And this verse right here, it's literally talking about that. And at the end of it, it says, and guess what? Those who make them will be like them. So when you make idols out of other things, you can't hear God. You can't see God because you're having eyes that can't hear. I mean, eyes that can't see and ears that can't hear because you're like those idols that you're creating and worshiping. So anyways, that's where I jump naturally. I think you have something to say. What are you about to say?
No, I'm just like, oh, I wish I had this perspective like a long time ago. Like, this is really great. This is really great to think, like, before we even got to Psalm 115, I was like, oh, of course, we are the creation, because it's always been like, duh, how are you going to create a God out of something that's already been created to imitate that which created you and everything that you know? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if we are in his image, in their image, then yeah, we are the reflection. We are these many things, and we are created to not just, well, the representation is not just physical.
Not just what?
It's not just physical. It's supposed to be spiritual. It is supposed to be tangible. You know, I'm thinking about your friend that was like, well, all y'all do is get on your knees and beg and then go on about your business. And it's like, and yeah, we are supposed to, when you hear the need, it's like, okay, well, let's get a hammer and let's help each other in the community. Let's do this thing, you know, out of everything that we've been given, all of the tools that we've been given, all these different personalities. And if we're all supposed to represent, God and in his giving, his loving, his hovering nature, then surely we can figure out how to help with our gifts, how to help someone that is in need of help, you know, whatever what it looks like, you know.
Absolutely. And that's just like how the church was originally in Acts, when they all lived together and shared everything so that everyone, no need was unmet, right? And it wasn't the church that met it. It wasn't like they went to the church and said, I'm in need of food. I can't feed myself. And the church was like, oh, we have a pantry here, eat this. No, the people came together and made sure it got done. So it wasn't the responsibility of the pastor. It was the responsibility of everybody. It was communal living. It was a community that took care of each other. So I think that in America, we are very distant from that. We don't do that quite like Acts. But thinking about this image, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, somebody on Facebook, you know me, I'm not always the least likely to get into conflict on Facebook. God's working on me. My husband's working on me. He tries to help me. He's like, Andrea, come away, step away. But I try to hold my tongue a little bit, but sometimes I don't. One thing that somebody posted recently, and I don't want to call this person out because this is what the church teaches. It's not like she posted something that was out of the norm for an American Christian to post. It was about how microchips were being implanted in people, and that this was a sign of the mark of the beast, and how we need to stay ready, right? So there was companies that were implanting microchips into their employees, so they didn't have to have a key card to get into the building or whatever. And, I commented on it and I was like, originally I didn't even get into the spiritual side. I was like, hey, that article is from 2006. So it's outdated, just FYI. And she's like, because, 2020 has been a crazy year. I mean, like to have this article would make sense, right? But I was like, hey, just so you know, it's from 2000. She's like, yeah, but still, don't you think that this is, isn't it still going on today? And what do you think about the spiritual implications? And I was like, oh, she asked a direct question. So I'm gonna answer her. And I was like, to me, when I read it, so here's the verse in Revelation 16. Well, maybe it's not 16. Let's see. 13. In Revelation 13. See, I don't have numbers and stuff memorized. I know that it's on the right page at the top. So I just got to turn a couple, and it's this far back from the end, so I got to turn to that page. So Revelation 13, that's only one page before 16 in my book. Revelation 13 is talking about the beast that came from the earth. And it talks about in verse 16, and he requires everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be given a mark on his right hand, the person who's receiving the image, or on his forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, the beast's name, or the beast's number. So a couple of things that stood out when I was talking to her about what my thoughts were. I already thought, okay, I don't think this has anything to do with individuality. So a chip that allows us to, like a credit card, right? My credit card, I don't have it on me right now, has a little chip.
Don't show it. Don't show it. We all know what it looks like.
It has a little chip in it.
On YouTube, we know what that looks like.
Well, the microchips are a little different. They're like a grain of rice, but it's the same information, kind of like rolled up and stuck into you. But what it does is it identifies you, right? But that's not what you're marked with, according to the verse we just read. What you're marked with is the mark of the beast, literally his name or his number. It doesn't say you're marked with your own set of numbers. It doesn't say you're marked with something to identify yourself. No, you're marked with something that claims your identity to be that of his. You were saying, I am taking on the mark of the beast. I'm taking on your name. Names are important in the Bible. I am taking on your number. Numbers are important in the Bible. But then when I was going back and forth with her, I was like, okay, what does this word mark mean? So I went and I looked it up in the Greek dictionary, because it's Greek in the New Testament mostly. I was like, okay, let's look this up. What's word mark mean? Mark is the same word for idol. Same word as the Hebrew word Zelem. The other time that this mark is used is in Acts, when they go and they destroy all the idols. So it's image, it's the word image. that it translates idol, or in this case, mark. So you're taking on the image of the beast. So you're taking on his identity when you take the mark of the beast. And this just screamed to me back to what we were studying with Genesis, because I'd already prepared this. This was like 2 weeks ago. It was probably the Tuesday after, like 2 weeks ago, that Tuesday night. And I had just prepared this study, and I was all about image, right? And so when I saw that this word was image, I was like, this goes back to Psalm 115. Those who make them will be like them. They are literally taking on the image of the beast, whereas we are made in God's image. That's what this is talking about. It's talking about that decreation that we got into a couple weeks ago. Like, God created us, and his purpose is to unify us and for our wills to unite with his and to do his purpose. But when we take the mark of the beast on, we're saying, I no longer want to be made in God's image. I want to take on that image. Like, that's who I want to follow. That's who I want to study. It's identifying yourself with them. And so Psalm 115, those who make them will be like them. To me, that's what that is. But
it's so important to read, right? Just go off, like to think. I'm sorry, but I just do not believe that our ancient selves understood what a microchip is, and to use that type of wording, to use that.
That's why they didn't say
a mark, but it's like, that's not the first time I've heard that. And the interpretation goes so far, because it's like, the first time I heard of somebody like microchipping their dog, they're like, it's going to be people next, and then the end of the world. And I was like, what?
But that's what we pray for. When we pray for peace in Israel, that's what you're praying for, is the end of the world to come, for Jesus to come. When Jesus comes back, guess what that is? That's the end of the world. That's what we want. We want revelation to happen. Like, you have to realize that when you're praying for God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, ultimately we want that unification. We want, because I don't know a Christian who thinks, there are some who think it's all imagery and
well, they think that,
not literal.
Taking stuff, we're building up stock in heaven, or taking stuff.
Yeah, but most Christians think that revelation will happen in some way or form. Whether it's like, okay, well, this is symbolic of that, or some people think it's literal, right? So there's a lot of different ways to interpret it, but nobody's like, revelation's not going to happen. So you can't say, well, I'm praying for this and for Jesus Christ to come back, but we know what's going to lead up to Jesus Christ to come back. So when you're praying for him to come, that means all this stuff, that's all the birth pains that are going to happen before his arrival, because that's what it's related
right.
to. It says it's birth pains.
Right.
So anyways, that was just following image throughout. In Revelation, we see that same word, just the Greek cousin image. And when we talk about the image of the beast, right? The mark of the beast, it's the image of the beast, his idol. Those people who take on that image is his becoming his idol. But I also wanted to talk about Isaiah 44, verses 9 through 20. So this is going to be, it's a little lengthy. It's not just a short little passage. It's, a good number of verses. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading Isaiah 44, verses 9 through 20. All who make idols are nothing, and the things they treasure are worthless. Those who would speak up for them are blind. They're ignorant to their own shame. Who shapes a god and casts an idol, which can profit nothing? People who do that are going to be put to shame. Such craftsmen are only human beings. That's what you're talking about. Like, humans are creating it. How is that even a god, right? Let them all come together and take their stand. They will be brought down to terror and shame. The blacksmith takes a tool and works with it in the coals. He shapes an idol with hammers. He forages it with the might of his own arm. He gets hungry and he loses his strength. He drinks no water and grows faint. The carpenter measures with a line and makes out an outline with a marker. Then he roughs it out with a chisel and he makes it with compasses. He shapes it into human form in all its glory, that it may dwell in a shrine. He cuts down cedars, or perhaps a cypress or an oak. He let it grow among the trees of the forest, or planted a pine, and then the rain made it grow. And then it's used for fuel for burning. And some of it he takes to warm himself. He kindles a fire and bakes bread, but he also fashions a god and worships it. He makes an idol and bows down to it. Half of the wood he burns in the fire. Or over it he prepares his meal. He roasts his meat and eats his fill. He also warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm. I see the fire." But from the rest, he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships. And he prays to it and says, "Save me. You are my God." They know nothing. They don't even understand. Their eyes are plastered over and they cannot even see. Their minds are so closed that they can't understand. No one stops to think. No one has the knowledge or understanding to say, half of it I used for fuel. I even baked bread over its coals, and I roasted the meat and I ate. And yet I make a detestable thing from what is left. And now shall I bow down to a block of wood? Such a person feeds on the ashes. A deluded heart misleads him. He cannot save himself or say, "Is not this thing in my right hand a lie?" And that goes to what you were talking about. Like, people need to read and understand for themselves, and not just like take the, to me, this is people doing things without thinking. Because if it's this person who's making this idol out of a pine tree, which they talk about this tree growing out of the ground that's watered by rain, right? Who caused it to grow? Who caused its creation? God did, right? And yet humans are cutting it down and creating this idol and then worshiping it. Oh, but first we have to make the fire and cook the food over it. And then you ask it to save you. Like, what kind of common sense is that? And that's, to me, very much what you were saying earlier. Like, these people aren't even using common sense here. So humanity, going back to Genesis, in the garden is an incarnation of God's heavenly presence and rule on earth. To appreciate the full force of this image of God in humanity theology, we must have in mind the role of idols in an ancient Near Eastern religion. So when we think of idols, we just think of inanimate objects. Here's my God, here's my statue, right? Nice little thing. But when a God is set up in the real presence, it is set up to be the real presence of God. So they believe when they have these idols that the presence of God comes and indwells it, right? Because the God is really believed to inhabit the image. The image is then the God, and its proper care and veneration guarantees the God's benefit and protection of the worshiping community. People will clothe their images, their statues, their idols. They will feed them. I can't remember what religion it was, but there was a person who had a shrine set up and they had their little statue in it, and they would daily like open a granola bar and set it in front of the image, right? But does the granola bar ever disappear? No, they had to go clean it up every night, right? And then feed it another piece of food the next day. They clothe it, they bathe it. They take care of it because they feel like it is God, because it is believed that God inhabits that, right? And so it's given its proper care. With this understanding of divine images, in Genesis 1, we see that this sharply focused worldview claim about humans. Humanity is the eyes, the ears, the mouth, the being, the action of the creator, God within his creation. And so when we get into the New Testament, we say, okay, we're the temple of God. We are what he inhabits, right? You can see that this is already happening in Genesis 1. Right? In Genesis 1, we're already his image. He already comes and indwells us right then and there. It's when we got kicked out that presented that separation and that problem from the beginning. Excuse me. So this point gives the biblical prohibition of idolatry a strongest possible rationale. For humans to make an idol is foolish because it fails to appreciate that according to the original order of creation, it is humanity that functions in relation to God as the idols in relation to their other gods. So humanity is the living idol. We are the living statue, the living image. In Mesopotamian culture, statues of gods underwent rituals called mispi, which is mouth washing, and pitpi, which is mouth opening, accompanied by ritual incantation, and blessings, in which the deity's presence became one with the statue. So these statues, having gone through the purification and changing and activating rituals, they were effectively considered to be the god. After the ceremony, the statue had become God, was no longer referred to as an image or an idol. Instead, it was referred to by the name of the god or goddess that it represented. It was clothed, fed, cleaned on a daily basis as if it were alive, like we were just talking about, right? And this ritual transformation, the image did not stand for, but was actually a manifestation of that subject that it represented. And thinking about, okay, that was Mesopotamia, which means the land between two rivers. So it was on that Iberian Peninsula. But just next to it, which has a lot of screen time in biblical narrative, is Egypt. And Egyptian royal ideology. Remember, there was a ruler called a pharaoh, right? And the pharaoh was called the image of Re. That's what pharaoh means, the image of Re. Re is the sun god, the chief of the Egyptian pantheon. So it's the highest deity of all the Egyptian gods. So pharaoh was the image of Re, of that highest god. He was considered to be God himself, right? And then he'd die and a new pharaoh would come and he was the new god. Pharaoh Amos lived in about 1500 BC. He was called the Prince of Re, or the child of Queb, his heir, the image of Re, whom he created, the representative for whom has set himself on earth. Queen I can't say this name. Hatshepsut. I recognize the name. I've read it. I've never said it out loud. The Queen of Egypt, not Cleopatra, right? Older one. She's described as being the superb image of Ammon, the image of Ammon on earth, the image of Ammon-Re to eternity, his living monument on earth. Now that's in quotes. That was found in a tablet. It's ancient writing that they have found. So this queen literally is written out about as the superb image of Ammon, the image of Ammon on earth, the image of Ammon-Re to eternity, his living monument on earth. That sounds a lot like humanity is to God, right? We are his image living on earth. Amenhotep II in 1400 BC. He was titled image of Re or image of Horus, or in quotes, holy image of the Lord of gods. Amenhotep III in the 1300 BCs. He was called by Ammon, my living image, creation of my members, whom Mut bore for me. So all of them are being talked about as if they're images of gods. All of these examples are images of gods, right? And they ruled on behalf of the god, but not as his representative. They ruled as God himself. In Egyptian culture, the only person that carried this image of God was the pharaoh himself. So central to this ideology was the divinity of the Pharaoh, by which he was set apart from all the other human beings on earth, because he was the only image of the God, right? So the central function of the king was to be this intermediary function of uniting the earthly and the divine realms together. The Pharaoh was thought, in a fairly strong sense, to be a physical, local incarnation of whatever deity, like Re or Haman or whatever. The same as that of a religious statue or image of God of metal, silver, gold, wood, stone, which is also such an incarnation. The king was a place where God manifested himself and was a primary means by which the deity worked on earth. So in ancient ideology, the king is the image of God. This widely attested functional similarity between the king of God of Mesopotamia, whereby the king represents the god by virtue of his royal office and is portrayed as acting like the god in specific ways, provides the necessary background for our understanding of the descriptions of the kings as images of God. And this provides the most plausible set of parallels for interpreting the image. I don't speak Latin, so forgive me if I say it wrong. You probably know better than me. Imago Dei, image of God, Imago Dei. And in Genesis 1, humanity is dignified with the status and role that is inagulate, the same as the stature and role of the kings in ancient Near East. So Genesis chapter 1 constitutes a genuine democratization of ancient Near Eastern royal ideology. In other words, we have this image of God, right? Humanity is called to be the representative and intermediary of God's power and blessing on earth. This is a complete upheaval to the norms of all the other cultures in the area, right? We briefly talked about in Mesopotamia how their kings were considered gods, and in Egypt, the pharaohs were gods, right? In Jewish culture, they didn't say their one leader was the image of God, right? They said every human being is the image of God. That like threw everything upside down. It's saying that there is not one chosen person to be God's image and his ruler, but that all humanity, male and female, are his images and are to rule his creation. It's such a revolutionary idea in ancient history. There's no culture, no people group that had anything anywhere near this equalizing. All of those ancient societies were structured with such a very small number of people that had access to influence and power and wealth. In ancient societies, they would generate mythologies to confirm the idea that these select group was chosen by the gods for this, right? We still have Europe, the king and queen. That is still a theocracy. They still say that they're in place because of God, right? The king and queen of England. But page 1 of the Hebrew Bible snubs all of that. There's not a human on earth who doesn't have this status of image of God. And it's hard to overestimate the revolutionary nature of this idea. I had someone in my study once who was like, if we start riding on MARTA, you know what MARTA is, it's public transportation here in Atlanta. If you ride on MARTA and you realize that person sitting next to you that you were so about, like you do on MARTA, is the image of God, you'd have a whole nother type of respect for the humans around you when you realize that that's God in them. The image of God is God in them, right? And it also reminds me of Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, neither is there male nor female. We are all one in Christ Jesus, meaning like you don't have just the one chosen person. We are all images of God. Thinking back to that Psalm 115 and how it says, you'll become like one of them. You'll become like those idols that you created and worship. It's not saying you're going to turn to wood and stone. What do those idols represent? In all those ancient cultures, the economy is deified. The gods of war, of sex and fertility, they deify the government, the royal crown. It's power that they're upholding, right? The social structures, the caste system. If they demand and require the ultimate allegiance. When you went into a city, you would worship the god of that city. The first thing, if you were a traveling person, because there are a lot more people who traveled around than we have today. The first thing you would do when you entered a new city is you would go find the temple of the god of that city and pay homage to that god before you continued about your business in that city, right? So it ends up being deifying the government or the structures that are set in place to rule there. And you can justify just about anything in the name of economic security. How many times have we heard, well, if I don't do this, I can't pay my bills, or, it's okay to not, if God tells you to give to someone and you're like, no, I can't do that because then I can't pay my light bill. It's easy to justify that. I need to pay my bills, right? Maybe I didn't hear from God. Maybe that was me talking to myself, just being compassionate, right? So we can justify a lot of things in the name of economic security. That's why you have so many people who run jobs and run businesses and do so and slowly let their morality slip away, because it's all about, okay, I need to do this in order for my business to survive, to provide for my family, to do whatever. Even in a modern secular context, the morality of people can slip away very easily through economic security justification. So imagine if your economy is a god demanding that you give everything to it. And that's what this statement is pointing towards. It seems like there's this idea that whenever you worship an idol, you give your ultimate allegiance to something. And this reminds me back to what we were talking about in Revelation, right? In Revelation, the mark of the beast, and you had to take on the image of the beast in order to what? To buy and sell and do whatever. It was for economic security, right? When you give your ultimate allegiance to something other than God in whose image you're made, in the image of Yahweh, whenever you look to that idol to be your source of security and significance, the process of doing so begins to distort your humanity. And that's what that Psalm 115, becoming like those idols, is. So the process of creating and worshiping an idol actually decreates you as a human being. Not that you lose your image status, but your fulfillment of that identity and creation is being hindered by idol worship, right? So understanding humanity as God's idol and us being that ultimate representation of him helps us to truly understand how disruptive Jesus was when he came, right? It was very intentional, the family he came from. It equalizes no matter where you come from. If you are human, you are God's image bearer. And how empowering that must be for all people to realize. That was very controversial back then, and it still is today, right? To equalize people from all different backgrounds. To say that slave was equal to master, Jesus didn't get executed for telling people to love your neighbor. Like, the Roman guards weren't like, oh, that's so evil, you love people, kill them, hang them, No, that's not what it was about. You got killed for presenting a threat to the people in power. And that's what Jesus represented. But the way that he's doing it is sometimes hard for us modern day people to see, because we're blind to the way we treat our social structures as God and sacrifice our ethical integrity to give allegiance to these structures, which we help to create. These are the idols we're creating today. We may not create idols out of wood and molten silver and gold. Our images that we create and worship and look to for security now may not be tangible items, right? And yet we're still enslaved to them and worship them. There's an idol in America of nationalism. A lot of people worship the flag in our country and being patriotic over worshiping God himself. So understanding humanity as God's idol it will help and us being the ultimate representation of him helps us to truly understand that fact, like that disruption. And to me, that was an eye opener, because it's like, I didn't see, when I was first reading the Gospels, I didn't see Jesus as like a threat. I thought maybe it was his teaching, because it said he came to teach boldly. He spoke as if he knew what he was talking about and things like that. But it was because he was calling all people equal and tearing down the structures of power that existed at the time. And what was it? Oh, that reminds me of the King James Bible. Part of the reason I am not a King James fan is because that's exactly how the King James Bible came about. At the time, there had been other English translations. We had I think it was the Geneva Bible and the Bishop's Bible. Those were the two Bibles. Well, the Bishop's Bible was the one that was used in the churches. It was literally chained down in the churches, and it was for the bishops to read, for the church elders to read, right? But I think it was the Geneva Bible. I could be wrong, because I didn't put the research up for me to remember to reference. But I think it was the Geneva Bible. And but that one was talking about how, your ultimate authority, your ultimate king is God, right? Not the kingdoms of man. And so there was this usurpation that was happening between the people. They were saying, I'm not under your authority, I'm under God's authority. And the king didn't like that. And so people were petitioning the king to have the translation redone. But they were wanting it redone because the Bishop's Bible was dry. It was read aloud during services, but it was very mundane, dry, would put people to sleep, right? It sounded like Charlie Brown, wah, 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 right? The Geneva Bible was beautiful and inspiring, and people understood it and they could get behind it. Well, so the king eventually ended up giving into this petition, but his thing was, I want you to translate from this other English translation, and I want it to be beautiful to those who hear it. That to me sounds like, oh, you want some tickling of my ears, right? And so his reasoning for ultimately giving into the translation was not because he wanted more people to follow God, because he wanted people to get closer to God, because he wanted to have a truer representation of the word. His ultimate reason for redoing the translation was because he wanted to make sure, and you can go and look up the edict. It's online. You can look it up in the original paperwork and, a typed up version of it. But it says you need to make sure that these people are going to understand that the king is the authority and the law is the authority. Yes, they can worship God, but the king is who they're going to be under. And I'm just like, and anyways, it's all about the authority and the disruption of that, and understanding equality in being images of God, and that all of us are made in the image of God. It's not about only men can rule, only men can do this, only white people, only black people, only this. We are all together. The only way we create the complete image of God is when all of our distinct individualities come together as one. Just like it says, Christ is the head of the church, and we are all his body. You can't have, if we cut off the hand, if we cut off the foot, what good is it, right? We all need to come together as one. We're distinct in our individuality and also together as one, just like humanity and male and female are made in his image. Back to that very first poem in Genesis 1:27. The plurality of God dwelling in one, and that whole idea. So images, idols. I know I didn't have a lot of interaction there at the end. I was trying to get done by 7, but I talked too much at the beginning. We talked too much, but I like it. So I'm sorry I kept you so long. What are your thoughts on images, idols, and that kind of thing that we dove into?
No, I like going deep into discussing what an image is and what that reflection is supposed to be, because oftentimes we think of an image as just the physicalness of it, of an image, and not, the spiritual component, and then um the it's not a 2D reflection, it's a 3D reflection. So it is not just a baseline image, it is how we are made and everything that we are capable of doing.
Hmm.
And going back to, I'm so glad that you brought in um the mark of the beast, because we have this choice of who we are going to follow and what we are actually going to reflect in our thought, our words, our deeds, who we are. And so, yes, we are created in God's image, but we can
take on that image at any time.
we can do some reckless things. And so it's like, what do you want to reflect?
Mhm.
Rather than going into conspiracy theories about, when the end is coming, or what someone else is going to do to you to make you something. It's like, what are you doing? What are you in yourself? What are you in yourself doing to reflect the kindness, the love, the friendship, the forgiveness, the humility? What are you doing inside yourself? What am I doing inside myself to protect that I will always be the image of God,
Yeah,
Because in Revelations, it's all choice,
absolutely.
those, what is it? Bringing those symbols, those big bowls or whatever, and things happening. It's always like, but there's still people
Hmm.
choosing to go left, and God is keep telling you to go right. And it's all choice. And so if you want to take on that mark, that's you.
Right.
But we have a continuous forgiving God that is trying to tell you, make the right choice.
Yes.
Make the right choice. I'm right here. I put myself inside you. Make the right choice.
Mm.
So this is really, really good. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming. I was excited about this one, and I didn't want to do it by myself. I wanted to have someone to
Well,
chat.
I'm glad you saved, because I'm serious. I went to work 2 weeks ago, and during my meetings, I was in somebody else's office because the place is like completely locked down. I just need to lock my computer into something. And so I'm doing these webinars and these meetings. So some are interactive and some I'm just watching. And I was handling pad folios and stuffing them into envelopes. And it wasn't a big deal until I did 200, and then I had to lift all of those. And I got home, I ate, and I went to sleep. And I didn't think nothing about it. And then you texted me, and I was like, ooh. There was that thing that I do on Tuesdays.
Well, yeah, and you have two of those things, and I don't mean to keep
I do, and I miss both, like out cold. Out cold. I think I had a piece of chicken, like I went to Sam's, got a roasted chicken, ate a piece of chicken, then lay down.
Well, I think that it's worked out perfectly, because it allowed me to have that opportunity to discuss that piece in Revelation about taking on the image of the beast, or the mark of the beast. And I think that just really, I love when I follow a theme from Genesis 1 all the way to Revelation. Like,
Yeah.
seeing it in its culmination and all the different iterations throughout. It's just wonderful seeing the whole picture. And
Yeah.
so I was really glad to have that discussion. It helped me understand. Like a lot of times when I'm asking people and talking to people about stuff, um, and they ask my opinion, like sometimes it's hard and you don't to put into words or be able to easily articulate your opinion about something. It's like, I don't know, I just think that, you know. So
Mhm.
to be able to understand why you think something or you have an opinion or a belief, to me is extremely important. I don't want like even my children, I've always encouraged them with their faith, question everything, right? Don't just
Mhm.
believe it because I told you to believe it. If you don't believe it, that's, you know, you need to deal with that. But I want you to question everything so you can understand why you believe it. Maybe you don't believe for the same reasons that I believe. Maybe our why is not the same, right? But you
Mhm.
need to know why. You need to be able to give an answer for your faith at any moment. So you need to ask those questions. If somebody, when I would go to Brazil and talk to people you know, about their faith and be like, okay, all right, you'd ask people, okay, are you a Christian? They'd say, yeah, of course I'm a Christian, right? Okay, so if you were to die today, what what do you think is going to happen? Well, I hope I go to heaven, right? Okay, you hope.
What you mean you hope?
Tell me more. Why do you hope? Like, what is this hope? Why are you not certain? And where does the hope come from? And well, you know, that's what I think is going to happen. Okay, why do you think that? You know, like show me. What is your faith based on? Is this just because you were told this? And so you just lined up like those people who were told create this idol out of wood and worship it and bow down to it, right? And they're doing it. And then those of us, you know, who think on our own think like, you created that image, how is it going to save you? You're the one who carved it. Come
Yep.
on now. It can't even move and you want it to save you. Like, you need to think this through, come on now. Right? So I think that we need to examine, and we're told to examine ourselves all the time, right? We're supposed to examine ourselves and our faith and what we believe and why we believe it, and that helps our faith to grow. And we can weed out the what is it, the chaff from the wheat. We're able to pull those things out that don't belong, because a lot of times we do have, well, why do I believe this? Oh, because I was taught that in Sunday school. Oh, well, like I thought Noah's Ark was this happy story of animals just like, you know, parading out a song onto a boat. But no, the reality is that it's storming and thundering and waves are crashing and dead people are floating around,
That's true.
like dead people everywhere. It's not a happy story. You know,
That's
like
right.
the imagery we have from nursery school is not accurate.
What, the cartoons?
Yeah, the cute little sunshiny cartoon animals holding hands, walking onto the ark together.
And the reason why we don't have unicorns is trying to at times.
I know, I know. So I thank you. Now, I neglected to pray after our recording before we started. So I do want to make sure we close out in prayer. All right. So, Lord, thank you so much today for today has been an amazing day. I got to see my daughter again, long awaited. She brought me so much joy, and I thank you especially for that. And I thank you that I got to see one of my best friends via Zoom. And I thank you for just so many things in my life, all my blessings. I thank you that my husband got to spend time with me. I thank you that I got to spend time in your word and spend time with you, my own creator. Lord, I'm made in your image. Lord, help me to do the things that you want me to do to rule on this earth. When we humans, me specifically, when I was put here to rule, it wasn't just to sit back and let you do your thing. That's not ruling. I'm supposed to rule on your behalf. I am an image of you, Lord. And so let me do your works and do the things to bring about the blessings that you have for this world, to create order and be those little pieces of heaven walking around here to share your love with others, to do the work that you have prepared since before the foundation of the world for me to do. I just give you all the praise, all the honor, and all the glory, Lord. Help me to be a better image of you in all my decisions that I make, all my actions, all my words, and all my thoughts. Help me to meditate on you. In Jesus' mighty name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. See you later. See you. Oh, no homework.
Okay.
No homework this week. I had extra weeks to prepare it and didn't even know.
Good. I won't have what is that called? Guilt. Yeah.
Well, if you want homework, you can go back and watch some of the videos that you didn't do last time. If you feel like it, not required. All right. Love you.
Love you.